Welcome to this ECIS Studio podcast.
Okay, good morning, Fandy. Thank you so much for joining us on this ECIS podcast conversation. I know that we've been meaning to catch up with you for a long time, and I'm really happy that we finally managed to make our calendars work. How are you today, and where are you joining us from?
I'm great. It's actually a great beginning because today I'm in Ireland, and in Ireland, October is Black History Month. So it's been a great beginning to sort of reconnect and see students' leadership as well, and how they are engaged in this. It's actually been a good Monday.
Yes. Oh, fantastic. That's great to hear. Well, I'd love you to talk us through for the listeners or the viewers who don't know, a little bit about your work yet. They're learning about you for the first time. Could you tell us a little bit about you first, your background, personally, professionally, how you came to work in international education, just to get us started?
Cool. That's a long story. So I was born in Colombia. I'm originally from Colombia. My first language is Spanish, and I always had that sense of wanting to know about myself and the world outside of me. So I taught myself English, and it was my favorite subject at school as well. So once I finished university, I knew I wanted to go out and specialize. And I am a speech and language therapist. That's my undergraduate degree. And I feel like everything that I have done has obviously come to form the person who I am. But what I'm mentioning about being a speech and language therapist is because during that time, I learned to see the child and the development of the child. And that was how my understanding of communication and being a whole person sort of began. Mm-hmm. So even though I didn't move on to follow that career, once I left, finished university, and I went to learn English, conversational English, then I ended up going to South Korea. Mm-hmm. And that's where I started teaching internationally in a lovely medium-sized school. But I am very proud of that school in Seoul, South Korea, because I got to interact with many students from multiple backgrounds. Like we were a medium-sized school, so it meant that we had students coming from the embassies from Asia or from Africa, so sort of like the middle band of international schools, if you take them as that, what people like to call them tiers. Yeah. But it just made it so real. Yes, so that's how my international teaching began back then. So now is, I think, 17 years. Wow. I don't like to count. Right. Yes. So from South Korea, I stayed there 9 years. And then I started branching out to other things. Like I started I did the international teaching certificate at the time, I think, in ECIS. Mm-hmm. So that's how it started. So my primary specialization has been language, right? Understanding language acquisition. Yeah. And during that time in that school, I also started to see that to understand multilinguals, it wasn't just enough to understand them as learners of language. Like during my time in South Korea, I saw all the terminologies shift, and now and I was very proactive in my school in understanding multilinguals and understanding that apart from they learning English, the term ESL switched to ELL, mm-hmm. English language learners, but it still didn't resonate with me because they weren't people learning English, right? They were whole students. Yeah. Yes. So, and at the time, I originated the transition committee for understanding students. Look, I'm going on that tangent because I just have been involved in so much of this, but that's sort of my inquiry. It has been a decade's inquiry into understanding how can we support students as whole persons in the classroom and take them as whole beings, their histories, their languages, their cultures, valuing their cognition and that skills, multi-language skills that they have and that they bring to the classroom. So long story short, from South Korea, then I got married, right? And then that's how my personal history with Ireland began. Well, at South Korea, I was like very involved in the Irish community, playing Gaelic football and all of that. And then from then my life switched because we wanted to come closer home. So we started having children. And so we moved to Italy. We were in Italy in an international school there as well. It was difficult. We didn't last. Yeah, with small children. And then after that, I had like a parental break. So we went to Colombia. My husband worked in a school in Colombia. And I want to say this because I know I'm taking long, but my whole journey informs everything that I'm doing now, right? And I have always been very reflective and very proactive, and I always stay learning, right? Whether with certificates, whether like independently researching, I always did that. So when I came back to Colombia, I had a huge reverse cultural shock, right? Because coming back to a city called Cali, and there is a bilingual school there where my husband was working, it showed me the realities that I perhaps didn't see when I was living there, right? And I started to see how much racism I had internalized. And I started to see the structural racism and personal prejudice now from another perspective. Like I wasn't now that subject engaged in a receiver, right? And I was also, when I was back there, I was receiving it, but at the same time, I was that observer, and reflective practitioner and educator. I was still an educator, but at the time I was in the role of, household, bringing the kids, supporting the husband, and getting engaged with mothers who were foreign to the country, right? And yes, and yeah, another story. Like I'm never just still. Like I'm always like trying.
You're always in movement. Yeah, I'm definitely feeling that. But
Actually, I like to think
it's exactly what you preach as an educator. It's exactly what we preach all the time. That identity forms experience, and your experiences have definitely shaped steps that you've taken next. So that end of the story led us really nicely to our second question, which is about how did the continuum, it's the IDEIJ continuum that you have built over these years from your formed and lived experiences. How did it come about then, moving on from your time in Colombia and the experiencing of that racism, injustice, you feeling like an outsider in your own setting? Talk us through that. What were the first steps to creating IDEIJ?
Yeah, but I do have to finish the journey because it's part of like what the continuum is and how was it informed by. Basically, I thank you for that question because I know how it came, right? But there was one aspect that I hadn't incorporated to what made it valuable and unique in my own eyes, right? So from Colombia, because of the reverse culture shock, I couldn't fit in anymore. Like it was huge. And then we're going back. Say I'm going back to teaching, and that's what like trying to re-enter the international education space began. There was a school in Uganda that I love, and that's where we came. And that was another journey for me because it was the first time that I was going to be in Africa, right? And understanding another side of myself. Up to that point, I had navigated international education as a Spanish teacher, as a Latin person, of Black. We completely mixed because of the history in Colombia, but basically marginalized person back in my country. And then I come to Africa and I learned so many things, and I saw the colonialism and etc. And the difficulties in that school, I was still affected and being, actually I was quite traumatized in not because of the school, but because of the whole setting of how it works, right? And yes, a lot of experiences that were very difficult.
Hang on a sec, Fandy, you're muted.
Oh, sorry, when did I?
Don't worry, I don't know, something slipped. It was just the last couple of seconds.
Yeah, the internet is a bit weak today. Right. So yeah, so that was another aspect. And then I noticed that we couldn't talk about the racism. We couldn't talk about the experiences of Black students and the differences. And there were, I remember one allied that, we will be like shush, shush, shush in the classroom when nobody knows that we're talking about racism and all of the other things that happen. Anyway, so Uganda, and from Uganda, then I went to China. There's another journey there in things, but what I'm trying to say is the continuum comes from that experience of trying to heal those things and trying to put together the different things that I saw in Korea, that I saw in Uganda, that I saw in Colombia, that I saw in China, and now that I see here in Ireland. Because of my proximity to whiteness, I started to see the parallel of how perhaps my husband was received, or perhaps why there were some things that were better for him, and there were things that he thought like, but this is how it should be, right? Mm-hmm. And then I felt like, why not for students of color and not why for people like me? So I started really, so the continuum comes from that proximity to whiteness that I have, but also from those experiences that I had. And it came really to be a reality in 2020 because of George Floyd. I found myself in Ireland, right, where I had my husband was in China. It's a whole thing where I felt I was really in pain, right? And I knew of ALOC, and I reached out to Kevin and I joined ALOC, and that was the only way I could go through that, right? And just to see that I wasn't going crazy, that these things were, and I was listening to stories coming from the schools where I was, from students and from teachers. And so I joined ALOC, and we formed an EDI committee for advocacy, right? And in those initial conversations, what we wanted to know was what schools were safe for teachers, for students, because at the height of this, all what we were feeling was pain and trauma. And that space helped me sort of, transmute, sort of try to transmute that and channel that into something that could help. Initially, we thought, help students and teachers know what are those environments, right, that are safe for people of color or in international schools. And that's how it began. So and the continuum then.
Let me just take a pause, because I want to explain to listeners what ALOC is, in case they don't know, right? Sometimes we have listeners who are just starting to get engaged and don't necessarily understand all of the acronyms. So ALOC is the Association of International Educators and Leaders of Color, and it's an affinity group that is run by Kevin Simpson and lots of other people. Now there's a huge network worldwide of leaders who identify as persons of color and who are in doing all sorts of work in terms of making their schools more equitable places, as well as many initiatives to make sure that hiring processes and retention and safer schools exist for students and for staff as well. Mm-hmm. I think that's a really important thing to say, just so that people can follow. So yeah, back to the continuum.
Yes. So then from that initial sort of like type of meeting, then, as you know, there is so much to do. And people in ALOC, the different passions and experiences that we were branching out, or like ALOC's mission is to dismantle discrimination, right, in international education. And so then I engaged with that mission. And because I'm also doing the advanced certificate in the IB Advanced Certificate of Educational Research, I forget the name is so long, with the University of Bath. So then I continued sort of like researching researching the studies and synthetic evidence and the literature. And that's how I started to see, if we are going to know what schools are safe, right? Then I need to know what am I going to be looking for. And so that research was almost 2 years into like what indicates that the school is safe for students. At the same time, because I am an IB educator, like workshop leader and a school visitor, and the barriers and the understanding of how international schools work, I realized that it's not enough to say, here there are the indicators that you can see, and we don't want you to just like, suddenly, do you have to have eliminated discrimination? We know that, right? We know what field we're working on. So that's why the idea of having milestones, so schools that are committing, they are developing, deepening, and leading, right? So those are the milestones for the continuum. But at the same time, as a school visitor, I know that it helps for schools know a process, right? And so that's why the continuum has that dual objective, let's say. The purpose is to evidence that progress through the milestones and to take the schools through the journey and saying, if you don't know how or you want help in doing it, then we can help you in the process.
Yeah.
So that's school support and helping, evidence progress in international education.
Okay. Yeah, fantastic. So you have a process which you've just outlined. It comes from, and I think this is what makes your work stand out. It comes from a very academic informed perspective, and I think that in that respect, it's one of the most robust systems that I've seen, because it has this very, very strong academic tendency to break it down into steps and to make these milestones things that can make sure that schools are accountable. So, we've got the initiate, ignite, implement, improve, iterate. There's a 5-year cycle that's recommended for schools who want to undertake this work. Can you explain a little bit about that process and why it needs 5 years in your work?
It's strategic planning.
Yeah.
Yes,
I want to hear why schools need to make that investment as a minimum. I think that's important.
Yes, because as we've seen it, right? We've seen it how there are different ways the schools can approach it, right? And that's their journey. I'm not going to say these things are wrong and stuff like that, but eventually, I'm hoping that you'll realize that to be able to create equitable spaces in international schools, where I was saying where every student can thrive with all their whole selves, right? You need to take this as a whole school approach, right? And we have seen experiences. I wanted to just say, although the indicators have come from my research and the process come from my experience and my research as well, and all of my academic background, it is informed by the perspectives of ALOC members. So that is what it makes it so valuable, because we have poured the expertise and the lived experiences from the people who are involved in ALOC into this. So it's not just me saying, this is what we want to see, right? And with no basics. Like I like to feel like I know what I'm saying, but
no, but of course it's a collaborative,
right? What I'm trying to say is there are other people who have like peer reviewed, the indicators, and that have offered a perspective and how about this, and looked at it. So it has been run by other members of ALOC in the different fields, or even from their own personal experience. And yeah, so in terms of that, we take the student as a whole person, and it's thought in intersectional way, in intersectionality and intersecting, how it impacts and how the students is on. So from that regard, it's not just an anti-racism framework. It is, from all of our aspects of our identity, what is gender, what it is neurodiversity. So all of that and the social-emotional part as well. So it's a very around and holistic, that's my word, holistic with H, holistic process. So why 5 years? The initiate part is because I know that the schools are getting ready. And before you commit, you need to have some things in place for the process to succeed. We have seen approaches where perhaps it's taken from the marketing side of things, right? And we have gone through maybe a decade, even more in international education, when we have just relied on the 5 flags, right? Like faces and flags and food and that diversity. So we can sort of like from the front house, right? From our website, from you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, this is how many nationalities we have, how many passport citizens we have. We're so international. Yeah.
Yes. And even DEI work can be taken that way, right? From the marketing perspective. And I understand it is a very competitive field. It's a very competitive industry and is always striving for innovation. And if you're showing that you are doing this, but it's not just a one-time thing. And it's not just from, if you take the cultural iceberg of values, is not just what we see as behavior. It really has to come from the base, right? From the values of the institution and how that actually informs the practices that are in that school. So if you take it, there are schools that are doing it from that side of things. And there are schools that are like, we are just getting started and we want to start with PD. There are many leaders who now I've always have recognized this, I believe, and wanting always to do more, but they don't understand the complexities because perhaps the industry hasn't really heard from people like me and people from, ALOP or other backgrounds.
Yeah.
And we haven't really paid attention, and many times we don't know the reality. So it's understandable that leaders will want to inform themselves first, right? And many schools are starting that way. Yeah. And so for initiate is that get ready guidance, right? Particularly with leaders and key people with roles of responsibilities.
Yeah. Okay.
Right.
So that's initiate.
Yeah. That's initiate. Then with ignite is these are the stages of support, right? And the milestones are another thing, just for sort of like saying this is where we are at, to illustrate where we are in our continuum in the process. So Ignite is the first year where we help the school self-review, self-inquiry into different aspects of this, because how will you know if you don't see the reality? And I'm not trying to, leaders know this, right? If we really want to take a whole school approach, then we really need to have a hard look. Different aspects of how the organization works. And if we know that equitable schools are not built, as a patchwork, then you have to look at your systems, right? You have to look at the individuals. You have to hear from the individuals, and you have to look at the way that all the interdependencies work, and you have to look at the institutional level. So that Ignite is just having a hard look. See, where are these inequities, or where are our strengths, right? Where can we build on from? So it's not only like looking at what we're doing wrong, but actually building on what we're doing right, and then from then on. Okay. And then the third year will be implementing. It's a very, I guess every leader could move at whatever pace, because it depends on the school as well, and the moment that they are. The complexity of this work is in international schools, we are so itinerant, like teachers move and leave, leaders move and leave, right? And so that is why it has to be a whole school approach, and it has to be on a strategic plan, because when the leader goes and then we want to start again, or not be informed of what has happened. However, the continuum and the milestones will say, well, our school is right now here, right? And whoever is leading next, can, pick it up from then and not have to start the process again. Yeah. So implementing is just learning from that, what needs to be done, that what alignments needs to be done, what capacity needs to be built, and evidencing that progress. And that is another thing, because the indicators really give you that evidence, right? What are we seeing, and how do we know? And so implementing the third year is that strategic plan and everything, evidencing the progress, celebrating those gains. the fourth year is improve. Yes. And so then it is from, this is where we're going to sort of like start evaluating that. What impact have we had, right? And improving capabilities and transforming culture, because it is a complex process. That's why it's so scary for many. But if there is a roadmap, then you can trust that you're moving towards that as a whole school approach. Yeah. And the last part is iterate, is because this is release of responsibility. Because then the school has gone through the process, and obviously you can iterate the cycle yourselves and continue building from there.
Yeah. Okay, I love it. And so I think I had confused the milestones with the process. I think it would be helpful now to hear about some of the milestones.
Yes. So because it has a dual purpose, so the support, this is how we'll take the school through the journey, right? And that's basically, accompanying the schools in that, in consulting and helping them build capacity. And you'll be connected or rely on a huge network of educators in ALOC and consultants and whatever. The milestones are more tied to the mission of actually sharing practice and evidence in that advocacy or that an international school. So for a school sort of like to know where they are after we go in through the process, or even if you do it independently, the school can send us sort of like, this is where we're at. Can we look at our, we did all self-review ourselves. Can you look at us where we are? And this is what happens in our school. And where would you say we are, right? And so we will take that evidence, see, through observations and conversations, and place the school and guide them through the next steps. For example, then we have the committing, which is the initial one, and because I feel that's where we are, most schools are. And then we'll have developing, and then we have deepening, and then we have leading. See, so they go in hand with the support, but schools can also just send us the evidence, and then we will say it's just a way of illustrating that journey and setting, like the name says, a milestone. See, this is where we are, and this is what we're striving for. And I know that international schools and independent schools, they're striving always to be the best they can be for their students and to lead in the field as well. And so that I'm hoping that by schools being in the continuum and saying, we are committing, it is a powerful message for other schools. We are developing. It's not, we know all the answers. It's a continuum, right? And so I don't think there is anything wrong with being in a committing, deepening, or striving towards leading, right?
Right. I mean, it's like saying to a student, you're only here and this is as far as you're ever going to go. This is the grade you're going to get. That's not how it works, Everything in learning is a continuum, and there's always room to iterate at the end. Why can't it be the same for our schools and our communities? Yeah. So I think you've already said it, but I want you to be really explicit now. What is the intended impact of the continuum? What is your highest hope for schools using the continuum, following it? Where would you like to see our community, for example? What would be a great outcome for you with schools who are signing up to this?
Yeah. Oh, you're making me emotional.
Think big.
No, I really like my mission, right, is just to see that progress, that striving. Really, I want to evidence in my lifetime, right? Yes, but I'm hoping that discrimination and I come from a thought of a holistic education sort of how can I call it, philosophy or stuff like that, where I can see that so far I want equilibrium in schools. That's what I want. I want that if so far this is where we have been, like elevating one way of being in our international schools because of our history of colonialism, how international schools began, but does know who the students are now and does know what international schools can be now and how can they help transform the world now, right? From that, let's move on to a more equitable, find the balance between all our innovations and all our, our pursuits, whether they're commercial or purely ideological or philosophical, educational. Let's find a true space for students and colleagues and teachers where we build from that difference, when we learn from histories, when we learn from different ways of being, not elevating just one way, whether it is in any dominant aspects of identities, right? So that's sort of like my vision. I would love to see schools, you see, already in the deepening, like moving finally from, trying to find out to committing and then embarking in that journey, even if it's not through the continuum and even if it's not with ALOC. Mm-hmm. I will hope that you'll see the richness of the indicators, the richness of the experiences that we have poured into this. Basically, this is a gift, actually. It's a gift to international schools because we have lived through teaching with you in your spaces, and we can tell you and we can help you move along this journey. And that's what I want to see.
Yeah, that's a fantastic answer. And my last question is just about continuing to visualize what best practice looks like for you, or who are the schools that are doing that deepening, that commitment? What characteristics do they share for you, and how can we know if we're in a school that has made a commitment and hasn't, or what are the best indicators for you in terms of schools that are likely to get it right?
Yeah. The first of all, I can see what schools are really, truly understanding that this is a process of whole school development. And one of the things is placing highest priority to this, because when you understand that diversity, equity, inclusion, belonging, and justice informs teaching and learning, right? And from there, everyone benefits, all the students benefit, even students with dominant characteristics, because the world that we're going, like that we already experiencing, is striving for balance, right? Mm-hmm. So if I have a student who has dominant, is being socialized, in that way, when, I have these characteristics of being proxim or the dominant group, they still have to learn, right? Yeah. About the things that they need to unlearn, right? Yeah. So it's doing them a service as well. And so those schools actually are placing highest priority, and where the diversity, equity, and inclusion is seen as an aspect of teaching and learning and well-being, all connected to it. And when I hear from schools that, okay, I have named a DEI coordinator and it's a part-time job, I know that they don't understand what it takes, right? And so then that where it is invested in actually reviewing again values, learning principles, and placing the highest importance to this, because you understand that that is very part of what teaching and learning can be in your schools.
So I'm going to press you a little bit, because I think that's a really, really good concrete example you just gave us. We have a DEI committee, or we have a part-time person whose charge is to look at DEI and fix it. As you said, that's not enough. So what does good look like in that case for you? What should the senior leadership team be doing, and what kind of role should exist within a school that's doing this in the best way? Like, where are my examples of good to strive for if I'm in a school that says, we have a committee, they meet twice a month, and it's somebody else's job alongside what they do?
So I know of 3 schools, actually. A school in Uganda, the school in Uganda where I work on, a school in Canada, and a school in Joel. So basically, from 3 people from ALOC who have made a huge impact in their schools, but they have been in positions where they have resources, they have time, and they have influence and authority and the space, voice, and agency to communicate this change. So when those are the schools that have succeeded, because they have taken this as one of the highest priorities in the strategic plan. And from then you can start aligning systems. So, right. So those are the schools that are set to succeed, right? Because it's good that, marketing can be involved. I can appear like, oh, this is a fantastic DI event that we did, right? And we all love that, and that helps, right? But that's just one aspect. That is just an outcome of where is it coming from? I don't know.
It's not embedded in the same
the
schools you've just highlighted. Okay. Great. Well, is there anything else that you'd like to say to the members who may be thinking about how to get in touch with you or how to follow a bit more of your work? Where can we find you online? Where can we make sure that we send our listeners to? And what is their call to action next for you?
Yes. So the call to action is reach out. Fandy Diney at idaycontinuum.com. Fandy Diney. I'm sure you'll put it there.
I'll put it in the show notes.
Iday Continuum.
Things that you might speak at or events online, or maybe things that they can watch to follow you. I can put those in the show notes as well.
Yeah. Well, I'm really looking forward to the task force that's happening in Geneva.
Absolutely. So am I. Yeah.
Yes. Because I think that is very key. I really want to see, I know we had a child protection task force in the past, and if this happens for international education, I really want to see that, sort of like going out and expressing that urgency for that. So that is the next event. I had just finished an October event, September. And the invitation is to, reach out. We also have, for those schools who are going on an approach of let's learn about it first, and then we were going to do the self-review. We also have workshops and trainings for sort of like plot your way along the continuum in terms of like building capacity. So this year we have a climate and culture webinar with Katrina, and that's in October. In November, we have a course with Nayon Weaver for building racial literacy for all educators, not just educators of colors, but for all educators, and how they can apply that in the classroom or in their role, and so on. So we have a series of 6 workshops this year for schools, and I hope they take the invitation and come and learn with us at all ALOC.
Sure, I'll make sure we link to all the forthcoming events, and of course to ALOC as well, because this is the network that you've built and have been a part of, and of course Nayon and Kevin and all of the other educators who may be offering things along the way in different time zones and different parts of the world could be incredibly helpful as well for our listeners. Yeah. Thank you so much, and I can't wait to meet you in person, Fandy. It's going to be great to see you at the task force meeting. Thank you for your time with us this morning.
No, thank you, Kyra. It's been great. It's been a pleasure.